Bitcoin doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's created through a process called mining, a key part of how the Bitcoin network stays secure, decentralized, and fair. Let's break it down. Okay, so mining isn't just about generating new Bitcoin. It's about validating transactions and keeping the entire network running smoothly. You can think of miners as the accountants of the Bitcoin network, making sure every transaction is real and preventing fraud like double spending. So how does this work? Well, Bitcoin uses a system called proof of work. That means miners, which are actually just arrays of powerful computers, they compete in a race to solve a kind of math puzzle where, statistically, the winner is just the one who spends the most computing resources. On average, it takes around 10 minutes for someone to solve the puzzle, and the one to do it gets to add the next block of transactions to the blockchain. Now, as payment for their efforts, they earn a set amount of new Bitcoin, as well as a smaller and variable amount of transaction fees on top of that. Now, a really important part of the proof of work system is that it takes real computational power to solve the puzzle. In fact, it makes attacking the network much more expensive than any gains you could hope to extract from the attack, which makes it very unlikely someone would go through the trouble of trying to attack the network. Okay, let's take a closer look at some of the gritty details of Bitcoin mining. So miners gather pending transactions from the network. These are proposed movements of Bitcoin from one address to another, posted by people all over the world. Now, the miners bundle these proposed transactions into a block. Then, using those specialized computers, they race to find a random number called a nonce that produces a valid hash when combined with the block's data. All right, so a hash is a cryptographic fingerprint, an alphanumeric code that uniquely represents the block's data. Bitcoin uses the SHA-256 hashing algorithm. It's secure, deterministic, and designed so that even a tiny change in the input completely changes the hash output. Okay, but what happens if more miners join the network with more powerful computers and start solving the blocks too quickly? Well, Bitcoin adjusts. Every 2016 blocks, about every 2 weeks, the network recalibrates how hard the mining puzzle is based on how much computing power has been applied to it during that period. So if more power has been applied, the next 2016 blocks will be a little harder to mine. This difficulty adjustment ensures blocks are added roughly every 10 minutes. No faster, no slower, no matter how many miners join. So, is Bitcoin mining legal? Well, in most countries, yes, but laws vary. Some governments support it, while others have banned it or imposed regulations for various reasons. All right, now on the question of whether Bitcoin mining is bad for the environment, people usually point to the amount of energy it consumes and the resulting greenhouse gas emissions. There's also the strain on resources needed to manufacture Bitcoin mining computers themselves. Now, critics argue that the whole thing is one big waste of energy and therefore bad for the environment because, well, Bitcoin is useless. Supporters, on the other hand, argue that Bitcoin has many important uses, such as providing a store of value that can't be manipulated by any single government or state, enabling people to move value around the world instantly, and so on. For these people, energy spent on Bitcoin mining isn't a waste, so to the extent that environmental degradation does occur, it's worth it. Now, somewhere in the middle of these two, perhaps extreme views, is the fact that Bitcoin mining is increasingly being done using renewable energy. Interestingly, this is not necessarily because miners are environmentally conscious, but rather because certain renewable resources are just cheaper, especially due to the nature of Bitcoin mining. So, unlike most industries, Bitcoin mining facilities can be built right next to renewable sources like hydroelectric dams, and they can turn on and off to take advantage of low usage times when the rate charged per kilowatt hour is cheaper. In other words, they can use energy that would otherwise go to waste, which actually helps to stabilize the electric grid and even finance its growth. Okay, so is Bitcoin mining profitable? Well, Obviously, yes, it can be profitable, otherwise people wouldn't do it. But the reality is that Bitcoin mining is a highly capital intensive and technically advanced industry. You'll need powerful hardware, low electricity costs, and access to boatloads of cheap money to be competitive. And as Bitcoin's price rises, more people try mining, making competition and difficulty go up. All right, next question. How does Bitcoin mining affect the price of Bitcoin? Well, miners definitely play a role in market dynamics. They earn Bitcoin as rewards and often sell some or most to cover their costs. This can add short-term sell pressure to Bitcoin. But the halving events every 4 years reduce those rewards, tightening supply and, historically, contributing to bull markets. All right, to sum up, Bitcoin mining is the foundation of a decentralized global financial system. It ensures trust without banks and security without middlemen. Want to learn more or start exploring Bitcoin? Download the Bitcoin.com wallet app and take control of your crypto journey today.